Okay, all right. Hi guys, thanks for having me. There's no way I can tell you everything that I want to tell you about aquaponics, which I think is the coolest thing in like recent farming history. So I'm gonna do my best to sort of give you a summary, explain to you kind of where I am and how I got there and where I'm going. So,
David, can you speak loudly so the video picks it up too?
Oh, I'll try.
Are you going to stand on this side or are you going to go on that side?
Well, I'm trying to figure out where to stand because
I think that's how it works.
well, you can talk to the AV folks. Does that work for everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So sometimes you have to look back in order to see forward. What you're looking at is a scene taken about 900 years ago in what today would be called the Valley of Mexico. This city of Tenochtitlan is at that time in history would have been the largest city in the world by most archaeological measures, estimated to be between 200 and 500,000 people. So at that time in history, given what we knew about agriculture, the only reason why that city of that size would have been possible is because they were practicing what today what we call urban farming. If you kind of zoom into that picture a little bit more, you get a sense of kind of what they're doing and how they're doing it. First thing is a little hard to tell, but up in the top right is the volcanoes. So they actually at that time, 900 years ago, actually had snow on them, and they actually had runoff, snow melt, and they actually created a levee system to capture rainwater as well as snow melt, a levee and dam system. So they were doing rainwater catchment, what a hip thing to do today. What you see in these squares are basically floating islands on the lake, and they're actually anchored by trees in the lake. And the trees are made, the rafts are made out of reeds, so out of grasses, and quite literally they're just boats. But because it's decomposing grasses, they're basically able to make soil and floating rafts of soil on the lake. In the lake were fish, which they were eating, and I think that indigenous fish in that area is called the Maya Mojada, which is a lot like a tilapia, but it's different. And they were able to grow their staple crops on those islands on the lake. And, like maize would be an example of one of their, and some of the squashes and gourds they would have eaten. They also had an additional problem in the city. Besides so many people in a dense area, they had a sewage problem. 500,000 people, like London, had the same problem not too long ago, more recently. What do you do with all that waste? Would actually let that waste run off into the lake. Letting that waste run off the lake was an additional level of fertilizer. It's human waste, but it's not much different than chicken or goat waste. And so they're able to solve multiple problems and turn into multiple solutions. How do you deal with their sewage system and how do you deal with their food system? Today, actually, if you went to the big sewage treatment plant in Los Angeles, they actually process the sewage in such a way that most of it goes out to sea, but some of it can't be processed anymore. And people think it's actually a solid that can't be broken down. And they put it on a truck and they take it out to Indio and to a place where they actually spread it onto fields. It's called human manure. And you can't actually legally do anything with it today, but they can actually grow grass and alfalfa, which they feed to cows, which then we eat. So even today, we're still actually practicing a similar process that they were doing 900 years ago. So what they were practicing then is what today we would call aquaponics, the earliest form by any measure. And one sort of interesting tidbit of history is that when the colonists arrived, one of the very first things that they did was they broke the levee system, because what better way is there to conquer a society than remove its ability to feed itself? And today, the chinaperos, the people who manage the chinampas, are actually still in a small region in Mexico. They actually are still practicing it. And you can see here, this is actually water reflecting here. They had a moat basically around, and the trees are still there, and they're doing row crops on it. So this has actually been proven to still exist, and you go to the museums today. So what the heck is aquaponics? In its most basic form, and we'll go into detail about this later, it's a closed loop system where water flows from a fish tank into a growing bed. The fish live in the fish tank, they eat, digest, and then what do?
Poop.
They poop. The poop is basically broken down through a nitrifying process by beneficial bacteria in the system that convert the waste into a nutrient source that the plants can absorb. So the fish are providing the nutrients for the plants, and the plants are filtering the water for the fish. It's a symbiotic relationship, as you mentioned. If you take one of the elements out of the system, the whole system collapses. And it's a form of biomimicry, which means replicating a natural process that occurs in nature. It's just a little bit more kind of contemporary, but also history. This is a scene in a marsh near Baghdad, where historically would have been considered the cradle of civilization. Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and the Euphrates River. In the Gulf War, Saddam Hussein recreated history or repeated history by conquering his evil brothers by breaking a levee system to actually in retaliation against the Shia. So today, actually, because they broke the levee system, I think that marsh has been reduced by like 95% last time I checked. There may be nothing left. But it was an example of they were still using it in the same way the Aztecs and the Maya were using. And some people say, who knows if it's true or not, that the ancient hanging gardens of Babylon, they would have occurred in this region. So who knows if that's folklore or not, but somewhere in there is the origins of what we practice today called aquaponics. And this is actually a real-world example in Burma. It's a little blurry, but it's they're actually practicing it very much in the same way that the Aztecs have done it, quite literally in a lake anchored with a trestling system in this case. I actually don't have boats in my system, and this is a pretty cool way. I wish I did, but it's not. So in 1970, a guy named Dr. Ricosi at the University of Virgin Islands, I'm not quite sure how he got to do this, but he is credited as being sort of the godfather or the father of modern aquaponics. That's his system there. All aquaponics has basically been adapted in one way or another based on what he's done in his research. That system's still there. You can go take a commercial aquaponics class there and go to the Caribbean and have a holiday. And he is still doing his business, teaching people how to do it, or setting up systems for people internationally. And while one thing I say, like when I teach this, is that there's no such thing as an expert in aquaponics. I'm not an expert, and neither is Dr. Ricosi, the guy who invented it, has been doing it for 30 years. The reason why he can't be an expert, nor neither can I, is because aquaponics as a technology, even though it's been around for 900 years, it's still evolving. We're constantly learning new things, and each improvement helps us, obviously, so each sort of learning experience, each failure, each stumbling block helps us make the system better and healthier. So while the systems that I use may look like that, they're radically different. And I can talk about that later too. A couple other visionaries in the kind of realm of urban farming. One of the great architects of the 20th century, Lloyd Wright, he had this vision of a city that had commerce and residences packed tightly together and farmland surrounded by it. So he's a visionary in that way, but in other ways, he was just describing what happens in Europe for like the last 400 years. Europe is basically villages, small packed commerce, and farmland surrounding it. But he wanted to bring that to the United States, and it hasn't quite happened. And this other guy, by some freak of nature, and Walt Disney was a visionary too, and he wanted to build a utopian city in a similar way. He actually wanted to build what Frank Lloyd did, and it never happened. But what did happen was the Epcot Center. And in 1980, the city of the future, which is an amusement park basically, opened up the hydroponic system as the latest technology in how to grow food in a dense populated area. And a couple of years ago, after 20 years of operating hydroponics, they adapted their system to aquaponics as the next great step. So if you want to see the latest technology in aquaponics, you can go to Orlando, Florida. I think this is actually the Pacific Northwest, but I'm not 100% sure. You see circles down on the bottom. It's a it's a fish farm, open sea aquaculture. Pretty pristine setting. This type of setting could happen anywhere in America, in the world. It can happen in Ecuador, where we grow a lot of tilapia, or in Patagonia, like the most sort of wilderness, or it's one of the more pristine areas of South America. They have fish farms like this. If you go to Norway, you have like Atlantic salmon, Norwegian salmon. You would see something like this. You go a bit closer, they're basically just fenced-in fish, like not quite like these chickens, which are happy chickens, and there's only 2 or 3 or 4 of them, and they're free to go escape to the neighbors. These are actually concentrated feedlots, just like our pork and beef industry is. And they say that the average fish farm in the world, where we can get our fish from, produces about enough waste that's equivalent to like 65,000 people dumping raw sewage into our water systems every single day. So each farm does that. Take the next picture. This is actually a land-based freshwater fish farm. You can see the density of fish. It's like every one of those things is a fish, and they're like basically there's almost no water. It's just all fish. Again, whether it's in the ocean or the land, they're producing a waste. And in the aquaculture industry, they're doing everything they can to purge themselves of that waste. They're looking for a way to, it's what they call waste. This is a form of, this is called hydroponics, and it's been, the technology was made possible because of the marijuana industry, actually. People wanted drugs. And so the nice thing about that is we developed mechanisms that could be adapted for marijuana or for growing tomatoes or for lettuce. So now we have a commercial hydroponic industry for growing food. And the basic concept is that you grow food in water without any soil. You go to the store and you buy your liquid nutrition. It's produced, the nutrition that's comes from the bottle is produced largely the same way that our conventional fertilizers are produced. Food is grown in such a way that it's actually grown in a sterile environment, meaning that it's actually void of life, because they're trying to control all the things that actually happen naturally out here. They don't want any of that. And there's even to the point where they actually have to purge their systems. So the aquaculture industry has what they call waste. And actually so does the hydroponic industry. They have what they call waste. But if you take the waste of one, you can turn it into an opportunity for the other. That's what aquaponics is. Aquaponics takes the waste from fish, or the aquaculture industry, allows you to grow food hydroponically in a way that there is no waste. And so somehow I got on the scene, and Evo Farm was sort of founded on the idea of growing as much food as possible in the least amount of space, with the least impact. We grow food in a way that exceeds organic standards. I feel like organic is not enough. It doesn't do enough justice to aquaponics, and there's not yet a certification that exists for aquaponics, but I look forward to seeing that someday. And some of the reasons why it's so amazing are listed right here. Higher plant density, more cycles per year, water efficiency, zero waste, exceeds organic standards, and it's absolutely delicious. So what does it mean? So it means that you see this place which is actually has lots of plants. it's actually, some of it's actually really dense, and I couldn't actually exceed that in a lot of cases. But where aquaponics does more is that can get the cycles per year. So if you're growing lettuce, for example, you can grow it seasonally here, but I can grow lettuce year-round, and I can do that maybe 9 times per year out of the exact same space, 9 cycles per year. Water efficiency, it's the most water efficient way that I'm aware of right now. They compare it to conventional agriculture. They say it's 95% more efficient, and you can actually go farther. You can be actually 100% more efficient because you can do rainwater catchment. Aquaponics is so water efficient that if you had a greenhouse, for example, or a surface to capture root to water, that you can, in most cases, in most climates, you can satisfy most of your growing needs just from the rain. So imagine that you actually have a farm that's off the grid, not paying for water. I don't know if you know, in the state of California, 1/3 of our energy costs is spent on moving water from one place to another. I mean, think about that. Like, we're talking about hybrids and plug-in hybrids and like conservation, but if we just grew our food differently, we would have 1/3 energy savings in our state. That's an enormous amount. So, of course, we don't have any waste. Everything. You have a question?
Yeah. How much water would you need to catch for like a 1-acre aquaponic farm?
Oh, now you're gonna make me do math.
I was just wondering.
But I can get you this answer. So maybe if you get my calculator, I can tell you.
Okay.
But I mean, it's this prototype I built. It's a 500 square foot greenhouse, which is about kind of like from here to your back fence.
Yeah.
Okay, and if it grows 1 inch of rain, I can capture about 250 gallons on my greenhouse, which is enough water to last me about a month on the average. So in the winter it's actually more, in the summer it's less, and it depends on what crops I'm growing. But so that's the metric I use, but I basically have to go 44,000 divided by 500, and that would be the answer.
Okay.
So I think that's right.
Okay.
And because water efficiency to me is like, I mean, yes, it's pesticide free and herbicide free. You can't actually use any of those things in the system because the system is a biologically balanced system. It's actually the bacteria. If you have anything in there, you have a system collapse. It actually fails. So you can't actually, by default, you can't use anything toxic in the system, which is exciting, but it's not exciting enough as just the sheer amount of water you save, which of course is our next great wars we fought over.
Is the state doing anything on the water efficiency?
The state?
Yes.
Like,
Are they funding any projects? You said 1/3 can be saved.
yeah.
Water, that's a lot of energy.
Yeah, no kidding. The thing is, actually, I'm not aware of that yet. There are USD grants for innovation and urban farming, and there are all sorts of things, but they're not doing anything large scale. It's still, aquaponics as an industry is not, I wouldn't even call it an industry yet. It's an emerging industry. And as the technology advances and people get more comfortable with it, people will be building larger and larger systems. But I assure you, in the next few years, we will see vastly increased amounts of our food grown aquaponically. Question?
Do you use all like natural light, or do you have to have supplemental lighting?
You can do anything you want. My philosophy is all natural light.
Okay.
Maybe we could just hold questions till the end and go through the slides.
Excellent.
Oh yeah.
So, some of the things I've done so far, I had an idea that I want to grow food in the city aquaponically. I wanted to build, I didn't realize at the time, but it was the first commercial aquaponic system in Los Angeles. And I wanted to find a farm that was, I didn't have property, I was living in an apartment, and I wanted something that was close by because I was actually going to have my first child, and I wanted to not commute. But I did put an ad on Craigslist, and I did find offers for land all throughout the city. And because my offer was very simple. If you have land, I'll come in and build a system on your property for free, do all the work, cover all expenses, and you can have all the food you can eat. The rest is for me. And so it turns out that I got lots of interest on that on Craigslist and other free recycle and other websites. And but a system that I like this size, which is actually pretty small, actually it's dinky, but it grows so much food that the family that provided me the space could only eat about 1% of the food. So it's, and you get a sense of kind of the setting of where it is. It was on a lot that was, it's a half-acre lot in West LA of all places. Couldn't believe it, undeveloped lots. And I went in there and clear-cut trees. I love to clear-cut, guys, because most trees I was cutting were non-fruit-bearing trees. They're unedible. They were non-native, they were invasive, and they created shade, which means they couldn't grow food. So I clear-cut them and did this, chipped them, which make mulch. And anyways, the benefits of that, I'm sure you've heard about already. That turned into this, which eventually became a greenhouse. That's a cold frame greenhouse with 2 layers of growing beds. And this is what I call my farm, but really more than anything, it's my university. I spent, I'm approaching 10,000 hours of this now. So I'm doing this full time, and I've read the books and I took the classes and felt like I didn't learn anything until I walked in there and started doing it myself. And in there I failed a lot, and that was the best part about it, because I failed on a scale that's manageable, but eventually I learned how to not fail, and there's still learning to be had. But now I'm at a point now where I feel I have a certain level of comfort. This is a view of the method that I'm using called deep water culture. It's actually adapted from the hydroponic industry. That's a view looking on top, looking down. Those are baby remains, mostly. Some kale on the right. And when they grow up, you won't see any of the white. That's a sea of green. And a view from below, those are actually roots that are actually underwater, in water 24/7 of their life. And Pearl had asked, how is it possible you grow food in water without rotting your plants? Because everybody knows that if you overwater your plants, you're going to have root rot. And it's absolutely true, except it's not because you overwater your plants, it's because you under-oxygenate your plants. And that the rotting that's actually happening is they're deprived of oxygen because it's the water is stagnant and it's not being aerated, and you get created anaerobic conditions, and you get bacteria in there that you don't want to have. Of course, it's driven by fish. In this case, that's a tilapia fingerling. And we say that the fish drive the system, but really, it's not the fish, it's the bacteria. It's the microorganisms, the complex biology that happens in ponds, the water food web, if you will. We talk about the soil food web, if anybody knows about that, that if you take out one handful of soil, there's 10,000 things in there, none of which we know anything about, but somehow we can magically grow food this way. And they say that the water food web is even more complex. I have a nursery. This is actually one of 4 levels, which Rish seems to be using the same method as you, that where your water starts at the top, it flows all the way down, and then when I water my nursery, all the remaining water returns back to the system. So no water is wasted in that regard, and whatever that can be absorbed in the plants is what's kept. This nursery, again, a 500 square foot system, in the beginning had 3,000 starts or plugs. And I was able to use a different size plug tray and triple that capacity to have 9,000 plants at any given time, which is way more plants than I could have in the system at any given time. And it gives me the ability to pick and choose which are the healthiest plants, and other plants. There's actually a whole nursery business in that. If you're interested, you can. The rest can go to a farmer's market, and people actually are always looking for starts, because seeding plants, propagation is actually a specialized skill. And there's leeks and different varieties of lettuces. And by the way, just one step back, just for clarity, that stuff looks like soil, but that's absolutely not soil. There's no soil in the system. That's a form of, there's what we call media. There's probably 10 different options out there of media you can use. In this particular case, I'm using cocoa core, which people who like coconut, they only eat the inside. There's a whole other part of the fruit that's unused. And in the world of the tropics, there's a gazillion amount of coconuts husks that are unused, and unfortunately there's a place in the world where people pulverize those things and make them available for us to use as an inert, essentially an inert media to grow food. And we touch it up with a little bit of vermiculite to help retain moisture. But there are other options available too. I've grown I kind of lost track of how many varieties I've grown. I say 50 varieties of lettuces, and actually a lot more than that. I've grown 10 types of red romaine alone. 10 types of green romaine, and butterhead, and a lot of heirloom varieties, not exclusively. I'm always trying to see differences between conventional seeds and pelleted or non-pelleted. But I like to just try everything. And what I found is that I can grow lettuce year-round if you choose the right varieties. Here it's bok choy, mustard greens, opal basil, leeks. This thing grows basically anything with a leaf on it. Vine crops like tomatoes require trellising. You can grow squashes and zucchinis. They take up a lot of space and give you very little food for the amount of space they take. It's not that they don't do well in there, it's just that it's not an economically viable way to grow food in an aquaponic system. So I focus on things that I can plant very close to each other. And root vegetables are possible, but it requires a different method that I'm showing you here in this picture. And thank you, Janice, for providing the photos. She came for a tour one day and snapped this on her camera and sent it to me. And I like it because it kind of gives you a sense of the colors and the textures that are there. And my favorite tomato vine on top, it's just like you can do fun stuff with it and trellis it in unique ways. And you can get a sense of how that's actually the early stage of that particular vine. And that was, how many months ago was that? May? Okay. So that was actually a rejected plant. I just I don't want it. I'll just throw it up there for fun. And of course it took off. And they say you can get like 200 pounds of fruit per vine. I never really calculated. I don't think I came close to that, but I think I got at least 100 pounds per plant. So it's, and peppers and friends, beneficial insects that just come in. And, so a lot of varieties that it grows. Actually my first time talking about aquaponics publicly was at the farmer's market down the street. I was at the green booth, and I was invited to talk as I am now, but it wasn't really at the farmer's market. People come by quickly and nobody wants to hear any details. They just want to see it. So like the night before, I put this thing together, or the day before, using a storage container from like Target and a lemonade dispenser from Bed Bath & Beyond. And like for $100, like I built actually a functioning aquaponic system. You can see the goldfish and the leek. You can use the leek roots right in here, and I think that's like 12 or 15 plants in like very small space. And what was interesting about that is that one of the kids all wanted the fish, and the parents all wanted the system. And I couldn't understand. This is just a demonstration tool, but they actually really wanted to take it home and ask me how much it cost. But it gave me an idea. And so I came up with an idea, like what can I build that would actually be a little bit more interesting, a little bit more productive. I came up with an idea based on a grow tower, these things here, which already exist. It's called zip grow towers, and designed for a commercial production, which is endless rows and columns of these towers, which plants can actually grow right up in the middle. And so I worked out a deal with the manufacturer then, and I want to adapt them for a kit. And so that thing became this thing, which is actually has been on tour throughout. This is actually the California State Fair where it debuted a few months ago, and it was my first attempt to build something, and it was just to kind of show people. Actually, it was the first time actually Aquaponics was at the State Fair, and it sounds kind of hokey, whatever it is, but 500,000 people saw that in June, and it's a chance to really create a visibility for something which is just this emerging. Created a marketing campaign. It's just in the earliest stages of what the hell that kit is, but it's all about health, and it's delicious, organic, and easy. So, what more do you need to know? That little thing, which is 5 feet by 3 feet, can produce conservatively like 400 heads of lettuce a year. So that's a salad per day, every single day. Plus a couple on the weekends when we have friends coming over. And while we're there, we were able to, with a group of volunteers in Sacramento, we were able to demonstrate different varieties called a media system, or ebb and flow. This is a Dutch bucket, this is NFT. All these methods are, more or less adapted from the hydroponic industry, and they can all be used as aquaponics. I started looking at education in schools as a way to, today if I want to hire somebody as a aquaponic farmer, I have essentially 0% chance of finding somebody. Except for Janice, who's not trained. But the reality is that there's not enough people who know what I know, and I'm desperately trying to replicate myself. One is because I want the industry to grow, and I expect to have jobs, and a lot of different ways to approach that, through apprenticeship, internships. But my long-term vision is to focus on students, on kids. So I was able to actually build one at an LAUSD campus, at Venice High School. And actually, the next slide will explain a little bit about it. Just click the mouse in the middle.
Oh, great.
Mouse in the middle should display. Do you have speakers on?
Yeah.
Can you click it again, maybe? Your volume.
The Learning
Just
Garden
2 minutes.
is a nonprofit organization that's here to create outdoor classrooms to bring back the knowledge of plants to the people. This garden here is specifically to teach all the different ways of gardening, and one of the things we're doing today is putting in a aquaponics garden, which will be teaching the students here at Venice High School another avenue of agriculture.
This is baked clay inside of tiny holes where bacteria can live. Good bacteria live. So fish poop goes from that the fish tank, and this helps it to break down. And then this filters out the water for the fish, and then it provides a cycle.
That's like the biggest thing you guys have ever done in this garden. This month, the Learning Garden and David came to us with this aquaponics project. It's very exciting. And we're out here, we bring the food, we bring the music, we bring people, and we're going to build this great aquaponics setup.
So I came down here to give a hand, and there's a couple dozen people, and we're all building this thing, and it's, yeah.
Everybody's just, there's almost not enough work for everybody to do because there are so many people, which is one of the best things, really.
And in this day and age, when you don't know where your food is coming from, this is a great alternative. You know where everything is coming from if you have your own garden and you're growing your own food.
So this is my own neighborhood, and this is the first time I've actually made it. It feels really good. It just feels good being around people. Everybody has a good time.
So I'm out here today to learn about aquaponics, to meet some great people, and get my hands dirty and be in the sunshine.
Just getting my hands into the soil, it's a good thing to do. It's grounding, and we couldn't use more of that.
And you guys are in charge of monitoring it?
Yeah. Yep. We actually helped build it.
That is a lot of responsibility, but I'm going to go ahead and say, fantastic work, gentlemen. I'm thoroughly impressed. Going to business is our website.
Back one?
Back one.
So, I got hired to build this thing at the school, and just the days leading up to it, the community heard about what I was going to do, and they said they wanted to be involved, and I said, I got it covered, I thought I'd do it myself, but they were so insistent of being involved that I just felt like I couldn't refuse. And you said a couple dozen, there was like 50 people showed up that day to help build that thing, and I sat around doing nothing. I was just like, pointing, and I'm used to, doing the work. And the lesson from that for me was that gardens build community. People want to be involved. They want to do the work. They want to feel the result. It happened to be an aquaponic day, but it could have been anything. Could have been raised beds or whatever it is. And now I have met many people from that day who they came up to me months later, and it was 50 people. I can't remember everyone in one moment, but there are lasting relationships that come out of that, and collaboration and future work. By the way, I'm really excited about this thing because this is a one-of-a-kind system in that it eliminates a lot of the fussy stuff, a lot of the stuff that doesn't belong, in my mind, in aquaponics. It's the most simplest form of aquaponics. I don't know if you know, like the very first one I showed you, Dr. Ricosi, he had a system that had as much fish as possible squeezed into it. Some time ago, some folks in Hawaii, they had discovered that you could actually operate the system with a lot less fish. And they sort of set the new benchmark of having the minimal amount of fish. And this particular system, that's only a 32 square foot grow bed. I could have had more. The school didn't want more. But that whole system is run off 3 fish. 3 fish, they start off small, and they produced I forgot, it's around 200 plants in the system at any given time. So I have so few fish that the fish are actually lonely in there, and to me that's actually, I'm sorry if they're lonely, but it's actually an extremely healthy environment. The water is actually incredibly clean. And the water actually flows into the upper bed, which is actually, I don't know if you saw those orange balls, it's called a media bed, a type of gravel. The gravel acts like a soil, and the soil actually, it's a biological filter, it's a mechanical filter. Worms can live in there, so you can do vermiculture in there, and it's also a growing space. And the coolest thing about it all is that, we were talking earlier about oxygenating the system, how you get root rot in the soil, and so I have to use aeration. And in most systems, you actually have air pumps, just like in your aquarium. You're supposed to have an air pump. But this entire system runs without any air pump at all. I use falling water in 3 places, and the way the water is circulating, that the whole thing is just, and the way the water flushes from one bed into another, that the whole thing is without an air pump, which makes it that much more energy efficient. And I'm excited to adapt this thing to larger commercial scale systems, because I think to me, it's a leap forward in the technology of aquaponics by having a much more simple model. And so just as a metric, that one thing about the school system, that produces around 1,200 plants per year in a 32 square foot bed, more or less. And but the total footprint of that system is about 120 square feet. It's about 12 feet by 12 feet. And the tower kit that you saw can produce about, well, not the one you saw there, but I have one that I'm developing, which is it will produce the exact same amount of food in a tenth of that space. So like the ability to grow lots of food without having lots of land is just around the corner. And to do it water efficiently, and to do it better than organic. This is actually just a rendering of my dream to expand from my little 500 square foot greenhouse to what would have been a 6,000 or 7,000 square foot farm. This one is going to produce about 200,000 plants a year, which is what I would consider the entry level of like a really interesting size to actually support your family as far as income goes. It's commercial farming in the city. This is actually someone's backyard. So in that neighborhood where I live, someone happens to have 7,000 square feet of lawn in their backyard. Flat, no trees.
Oh, wow.
It's called farmland, if you ask me. And I was getting ready to sign a long-term lease on this property to expand when things started happening differently for me, and opportunities came together. And it looks like I'm going to be building, instead of me signing this lease and raising all the money to build this thing, take all the risk to operate this thing, it looks like I'm going to be doing this on a school campus now, and hopefully on many campuses where land is free and water is free because they're already paying those bills, and there's actually labor forces out there for that, and because they're nonprofit, they qualify for all sorts of grant funding, and so I'm not technically the farmer, but I'm helping people build farms. This is actually a system, I think exactly the same size as the one that's before, but it's actually just built in San Diego. This is a nonprofit. That's 3,500 square feet of growing space. Phase 1 of 3 phases will be 10,000 square feet, and it will be the largest in the state of California. Like 40,000 plants in that picture. Right? They're actually, sorry, there's no plants there yet. This was like opening day. But 40,000 plants in not that big of a space. And there's all sorts of crazy ideas being thrown out there these days, including rooftop farms in Berkeley, California. This is like this is a student housing project. They want to put a greenhouse on the roof and looking for a way to make it work financially for them. And it turns out that aquaponics is, in my mind, it's one of the few ways that satisfy the definition of sustainability. Sustainability to me means that it's environmentally sound and financially sound at the same time. Because you can have all the great intentions in the world, but if you can't find a way for it to self-perpetuate, then it's not sustainable. I'll do this next one. How about that? Sorry, guys. I'll just step back here. How about that? Just some other images of what it would look like. This is something I'm not going to talk too much about, but I just want to give you a little teaser. There was a guy at Columbia University, Despommier is his last name, and he wrote this book called The Vertical Farm. And you can get it on Amazon or whatever it is. And he coined the phrase vertical farm, which means, in his definition, is growing food in a building with multiple stories. This sounds kind of like a pie-in-the-sky dream. He's actually an advocate for it, but he's not doing it because it doesn't pencil out the way he described it. Because basically, something asked about grow lights, and his model, you can only make it work if you use grow lights. And fortunately, they're not doing that because the grow lights are energy intensive and it defeats the whole purpose. So, all right, let's just take turns. Yeah. Some people approach me if they're interested in an idea of exploring the idea of vertical farming, and one day I did a quick SketchUp. It was like a lighting analysis to see if it was possible. Is it possible to grow food in a multi-story building and without using artificial light? And in this design, this is the equivalent of the second and third story. The first story would be like a restaurant, a retail, or an educational area. The second and third story building, it turns out it actually works in this particular design that you see there. And there's a high probability that the vertical farm concept will happen in the very near future, which means that, why does that matter? Well, in some places there's not a lot of space. Rooftops are awesome because no one really has use for them other than the air conditioning company. There's tremendous value in the city if you can find a rooftop that can support the weight of a farm, whether it's a soil farm or an aquaponic farm, but most buildings in the United States are built so cheaply that they can't support the weight, except for on the East Coast where they're built a little bit more sturdy. So if you can find a roof space in a rooftop farm, it's possible to make it work. But if you don't, and you don't have a great backyard like this, and you want to scale up to a certain extent, how can you make that work? And aquaponics in general has a 6 times per acre equivalent greater yield, 6 times. So if you have 1 acre and you're in the most dense, efficient farmer, aquaponics will be 6 times better yields. And if you can do it 2 stories, then it goes to 12. So 12 times per acre equivalent, which actually, if you Google, there are a lot of technologies out there that will claim even higher numbers. So, again, we're in the city. Eating is important. We all need to do it every day. But in this modern society we live in, people still need income, they still need jobs, and so it has to pay for itself in some way. No one wants to work for free. So it becomes a model that works financially for people if you can build something like that. And it turns out, actually, I just found this yesterday. There's an architectural firm in France, and I'll show you. They came up with an idea that's very similar to what I have. It's just a rendition. Go one more slide. You're looking inside a multi-story building where the floors are basically open. And so I don't know for sure if their vision is to be completely transparent, completely reliant on natural light, but the concept is there where you can use multiple stories in a confined space. I think they're a little crazy because they want to grow bananas in France. It's like they're pushing, it's like, you know, they want to grow food on Mars so that they can support, you know, it's fine, but it would help them be a lot more energy efficient if they just grew seasonally and what was ideal for their climate. So, all sorts of scales you saw. There's the desktop scale, the vertical kits for people's backyards and balconies. There's commercial scales, and even futuristic scales of ways people are going to grow food in a city, aquaponically or not, but in most cases these are aquaponic systems. There's a long list of reasons why it's important, and for me, it's all about health. It's about health of individuals, health of our community, and the health of the planet. But there's still one thing that's even more important to me than all of those things. And that's that guy. And this picture was taken just a couple days after he was born. This is my first son. And if I was a good father, I would have my other son. But I'm just sticking with this for now. Someday I'll add the next one. But there's the value of what we're doing today, what you're doing here today. Well, why everyone is here today is, you know, it's about eating healthy, it's about saving the planet, reducing our carbon footprint, reducing our food miles, reducing chronic disease, building community. My last job before I was a farmer, I was traveling the country making documentary films, which basically meant I was researching all things that were wrong with the world and all the possible solutions to the world. And it was the most depressing job I ever had because I was basically 24/7 eating and breathing like the one very realistic possible future that we're facing. And I was interested in documentary work because it's a way to create awareness. And I still believe in the power of media to do it. But I was looking for something that was a little bit more lasting than a 90-minute film. And for me, urban farming is a way to tell the story that matters to me, which is, as we've been discussing. And it's also a way to basically change the course of not just this one possible negative future, but a possible positive future for all of us.
Good.